Welcome to another episode of our podcast, the official Retro Achievement podcast. I am your host Draco655, joined by my co-host Shudzi. How are you today?
I'm doing good, man. Everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Thanks for listening.
This week on the show, we will be discussing what we have played this week, sharing our thoughts on achievement hunting strategies, and concluding with a conversation about hacks, homebrew, and unlicensed. So let's kick off with the first segment, the game of the week. Shoot, can you want to talk about the first game you have played this week?
Absolutely. It's been a little while since we had a podcast, so doing a little bit of catching up with where I've been at with the different games. But starting off, I played Monopoly for the NES by God Mode, and Monopoly is was probably one of my favorite games growing up as a kid. I've mastered the SNES version of it. So when the NES version came out, I was really excited to be able to dive back into the wonderful world of Monopoly and the strategy that goes behind it. And it's a pretty simple game. People that grew up with Monopoly are well aware of the rules. It's like a board game. You try and essentially bankrupt everybody by purchasing properties. People land on your properties and then pay you money when they land on them, and then you can expand with houses and hotels so you can charge them more, and you can do trades and deals where you trade different properties and uh, assets and things like that. So properties plus cash. If you're familiar with the game of Monopoly, this is probably a bit redundant to you, but for people that have never played Monopoly before, aren't familiar with it, although um, one of the biggest things that I think was interesting about this particular version of Monopoly is just that um, the computers are not always making the best trades. The AI is a little bit odd with the NES version of the game. Like, I was talking to another person that played this version of Monopoly for the NES, and I think they told me that they I think they said that they bought Boardwalk, which is $50 when you land on a spot, and the computer had Park Place, and they traded Boardwalk for Park Place for no reason. So Boardwalk slightly more valued as an asset, and also you charge $50 instead of 35. So it's kind of odd. The AI is not quite right, but that makes it a little bit easier to get some of the harder achievements in the set if you can kind of mess with the AI a bit. But that is a really fun title. There's a lot of interesting achievements in this set aside from the just the basic bread and butter, collect each property. Like, there's a 7v1 where you have to play an 8-player game, you versus the 7 different computers, and beat them. And so that was kind of a fun challenge for me to have to try and figure out a strategy to be able to win in an 8-player game. Because if you've ever played Monopoly with a lot of players, you know that it's really tough. Everybody's buying everything, and it's all the assets are so spread out that it just makes it really difficult to be able to gain any ground on anybody. So I ended up being able to master that one by kind of being a bit of a wheeler and a dealer, and just essentially being the only person on the board that had a monopoly by making some creative trades. And that was a really fun achievement. Just a really fun set overall. So thank you, God Mode, for putting that out there. Um, the second game I wanted to talk about a little bit was Pokemon Red and Blue. This game has kind of an interesting history on retro achievements. Originally, it was a mostly completion based set, meaning mostly just go through the game, defeat the different gyms, collect all the Pokemon, things like that. And it did receive a revision I also forgot to credit the authors, so my apologies on that. The set was made by Blaze Kickin and Dude 1286, so thank you for the set. But anyway, the revision that it received gave it a lot of interesting uh, mechanics that made you really kind of, number one, have to kind of think about how you're going to set yourself up throughout the game. A lot of missable, so a lot of planning. Missable achievements meaning achievements that if you progress too far in the game, you might not be able to get the achievement or go back and get the achievement. So I haven't finished the game yet. I'm kind of slowly working my way through it just to be extra careful and make sure that I'm um, not missing any achievements, but I'm slowly working my way through that one and really enjoying the revision and learning a lot more about Pokemon than I did before, just about, the different things that you would have to do if you didn't just have like a grossly over leveled Because usually when I would play Pokemon as a kid, and I think this is true for a lot of people, you get your starter Pokemon, so you get Squirtle, uh, Charmander, or uh, Bulbasaur. And what I would do as a kid is I would play through the game and just focus on that one Pokemon. And I'd catch other Pokemon here and there, but there's so many trainers in the game. And if you would grind up a little bit of experience, you could kind of just blast through the game and just keep killing more and more trainers to the point where, you were pretty much gonna one shot every trainer a little bit later on down the road, especially when your one starter Pokemon gets really, really powerful. So that's kind of what I did as a kid. We can't do that with this set because there are a lot of achievements where you have to be, for example, all the gyms, you have to have no Pokemon higher than X level. So no Pokemon higher than a level cap of 29, for instance. Therefore, you kind of have to figure out, okay, which I need some other Pokemon that are going to be kind of good for this particular gym. And even then, you have to kind of strategize a little bit more. And then also getting to really explore the world a little bit more. There's a lot of hidden items and little small secrets built into Pokemon that are really interesting to see for the first time. So I'm enjoying that set quite a bit. What about you, Draco?
First off, I'm very happy you played some Pokemon Red and Blue because I know it was a game I always said to you to play, but you didn't want it to play. But I'm very happy you tried this one. So first off, my first game I wanted to mention here was the Game of Life on PlayStation by Andy. So before talking about the set, I would just wanted to mention a little bit. Another story when I was younger. So when I was younger, I think I did go to the grocery one day, and then when I was wanted to buy my cereals, Cheerios, I believe, or other stuff. I know for a fact. I don't know if some people have see that before, but you can actually like buy the cereal and you got the Game of Life or Monopoly or I think one or two board games there, and you got like for free with your cereal box. So I think when I was a kid, I was like every time I see my dad, like, oh my god, I need this. I don't have it in my collection. So this is how I played Game of Life when I was a little bit younger. So I was very happy to see this game bring to RA with achievement. And then so I'm playing this set. I almost done with it. So you have like two game modes into this one. You have your traditional Game of Life game where you collect some life tokens, and the more token at the end, you have more money and you win. And the other interesting mode is you have pretty much you don't have life tokens, but you have like some mini games every time you land into life. And if you land on paydays, you can steal money from the other players. So it's a little bit another dynamic into the games, which make very interesting. And I have a couple achievement left. So, and I remember, I mean, I never thought the game was so slow. I mean, oh god, I mean, they have a lot of animation. At least we can not make them watch the cutscene and stuff. But the game is a little bit slower than I expected. But I mean, it's Game of Life. It's a pretty nice game board. So that was one of the first game I played. The second game I played into my couple of weeks was the Toy Story Racer by Mario 2188. So Toy Story Racer on PlayStation, I never played that, never, as a kid. It's a racing games. It's pretty well done. You have like 6 or 7 different characters you can do. Your goal is basically to collect 200 soldiers. So every time you collect one soldiers, you can like go up into the challenges. So you have different challenges to do as well. So example, lap time trials. You can target. You can kill some targets. You can do the race normally. You can do the race reverse. You can do an endurance race. You have like multiple challenges through your going, and you back and forth on each characters to go to progress further. So the set is very, it's pretty fun. You have interesting challenges as well. You have like some battles, very hard battles one to do. Some of those achievements are pretty much RNGs, and you have to the CPU cooperate with you. But overall, the game mechanic is pretty smooth. I recommend this game as anybody want to try some racing games. Pretty fun, but you're gonna spend a little bit of times into it if you want to master the set because it's a pretty uh, long. I mean, long set to do. But you're gonna like repeat and repeat and repeat a lot of those races if you want to finish the 200 soldiers. So, shoot, what is your third game did you play?
The third game I played this week, or I guess recently, that I'll probably play today is Cave Noir and by Snowpin. And this game is probably what I would say it's certainly up there with one of my favorite Game Boy games. So I'm really glad that a set got made and got introduced to it, or I got introduced to it through the set. I was not familiar with the game before, rather, because I believe it is Japan exclusive. So there is a translation patch available for it. Got that taken care of, and it's just a really interesting game. The sprite artwork is fantastic. It's like a roguelike. So um, a little bit hard to summarize, so I'll give it my best shot. There's 4 different modes, each with 10 levels, and the levels are randomized. So what you're like a little knight guy, and you go through different floors, collect equipment, and try and complete the objective and get to the door. And each movement that you do corresponds with, like, there's enemies in the room, so they'll do one move. Basically, things aren't happening in like real time, so you have to it's kind of a thinking person's game. Like, you have to think a little bit about the items in your inventory versus the monsters in the room and what you're going to do, and then make the best out of each and every situation that you encounter. And I have to say, just from the top to the bottom, as far as the aspects of the game, like the sprites, the music, the way it's set up, it's just super addictive and super fun. If you like Game Boy games, and you like roguelikes or both, I could not get enough of this game. And the achievement set is pretty challenging. I'm still working my way through the last ones in it, and one of the other things about it that's kind of interesting is it, like, it puts you in a mindset where you're kind of just trying to figure out, if I do this, the computer will do that. Like, figuring out the movement is what I was trying to think of, because each enemy has a different movement pattern that you kind of have to think about, occupies, a certain amount of tiles, so you kind of have to really think about that against the items that you have, and just kind of, again, make the best of each situation, because there is some RNG involved, that being that it is a roguelike. And as far as the the difficulty and things like that, I think that um, with RNG being a factor, that certainly provides a good challenge on top of getting in situations where uh, you're going through the game and you just get terrible RNG and you get bad items and you're not able to really make do with anything. That can happen from time to time. But you do start off with 4 items. So it starts you off with 4 items every time. Um, I've kind of tried to do this thing where I establish in my own mind, like, what's the internal value of each item? Like, how useful is this to me as opposed to other items in the hierarchy of all of the items in the game? And try and prioritize or get away with using weaker items or items that aren't as useful in certain situations. It's a little bit hard to explain how the game works, but that's I guess that's with a lot of roguelikes. You kind of just have to get into it and start playing it for yourself. But like I said, everything about it just has me hooked on it. And so if you are somebody that likes roguelikes or likes Game Boy, this is definitely a must play for you. What about you? What was another game that you played this week?
Well, my third game was a chaos. I mean, heck, I played Mario 64 Chaos Edition by Sporytag. So yeah, so basically it's Mario 64, but when you see an achievement list with a lot of achievement, but every single time you collect a star, have an achievement, means something you need to think more. So basically, this is your traditional Mario 64 games, but with a very, very, very hard time you will deal with. Pretty much, you have chaos everywhere. You just load your games, and sometime the game will play by himself, and you cannot really do anything. You can the object into the map could go toward you, and you're gonna die. The floor can be lava. You're gonna die. Everything's make your life harder. Everything is hard. Sometimes you just I was just playing like, oh nice, I'm playing like volcano stage. I just entered it with 5 life, and nope, I'm just gone. I'm just dying over and over. I could not even play the games. Mario, like I was just like trying to land, and Mario like move way ahead from the left side, and nope. Sometimes you can have a lot of coins spawning there. It's random. Sometimes you heard some. You have even you need even to play pongs, and if you don't play pongs and you miss the pong, well, you die. I mean, everything is here to make your life harder. It's fun. So the first time I played, I was surprised. I think I stick with like 3 hours, and I think in 3 hours I collect like 25 stars, and that was pretty a good deal for 3 hours. Let's say, but yeah, sometimes you can spend like 40 minutes before getting a stars. You actually don't know where you're gonna go, so you need to very adapt. But sometimes, I mean, sometimes the RNG would just say like, "Nope, you're not going there. You're going the other ways," or something like that. So this is really a fun game. But trust me, if you're trying to this Chaos Edition, you go there for having fun and just laugh, because this is very an experience, like very funny, and it's very fun for people actually like see you play this game, because at least they're gonna laugh a ton at you. So what is your fourth game, shoot?
So speaking of Mario games and that, by the way, I've watched you play that a little bit, and I'm not that great at Mario, but that actually does look like a lot of fun. Like you said, a lot of chaos, but also a lot of fun. My fourth game that I played or have been playing recently is Mario 64 Green Stars. It's pretty interesting hack. It's essentially just Mario 64 with new levels, collect these green stars instead of the regular yellow stars. And it's certainly a step up in terms of difficulty from original Mario 64. Not the set, but just the game in general, if you played Mario 64 as a kid. Just some of the platforming elements of it are more tough. The stages have more difficult stars to attain. You have to kind of do some tricks that you would most likely not be expected to do in original Mario 64. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm not the greatest Mario 64 player in general, so I kind of just poke through and try and at least get, a few stars here and there and do the best that I can. But the person that made the game uh, did a really good job just creating like a brand new worlds and making it really, really interesting. Again, I forgot to credit the author, so my apologies. That was made. The achievement set was made by Steven1337. So there's like an ice lava world. There's like a there's like a factory world. There's just lots of interesting worlds that were thought up by this person that made this hack, and they definitely, like I said, made the experience more difficult. So I'm kind of poking my way through that one and doing the best that I can with my limited Mario 64 abilities, but a very fun hack nonetheless. Hoping to master it at some point. I think I'm about halfway, pretty close to halfway through it, and yeah, it can be really tough. I mean, there's some stars where I've spent 20, 30, 40 minutes just trying to get that one individual star without the chaos involved, Draco. So tell me about your next game.
But before speaking my next game, or the Green Star game, I mean, the game, like you mentioned, is so beautiful. The music is very good. It's very like another step up, and I'm very amazed how the game looked like. And I think what the harder part, I was like, man, can I just do this game? I think that was like the first castle. The first castle was so hard for me. I did not like. Oh boy, that was just like a hell experience for me to the first castle. But I managed to play the entire set, and it was that was a blast. So my fourth game was another hack. This one we're going into the Super Nintendo one, and it's called Mario's Missing Done Right. So it's set by Stefan1337 as well. So this game is why I bring it up is first of all the game by himself is not hard. It's pretty like easy difficulty, but the reason I bring it up is because you're playing Luigi, which is better than Mario sometimes. Two, the game is really well made. When I say well made, is I did not see like any quiet lag because sometimes when you play some hack and stuff, you can have like some lag in some ways, or sometimes the game is not running good. But this one is really well done. The difficulty is not that difficult, so anyone can pick it up quite nicely. The graphic of this, the graphic and the entire map is completely like beautiful, and I have a blast playing this like very much, and I understand why a lot of people have played this game because it's just a wonderful game, and every world is different, like different teams, and wait, yeah, it's very. I think the only thing I'm sad about is some bosses was pretty like the same as the original SM Super Mario World. But beside that, the game itself is super well done and very so. So if you're interested into Super Mario World styles, this is a very game you can play and having a blast to it. So what is your last game, shoot?
Last game for me that I've been playing is Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle for the NES by Jamiris. Um, I grew up playing Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle for Game Boy, so that hasn't quite been made into a set yet. I've got a request in for it, but Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle for NES is very similar, basically the same game. just with color and a little bit of a different setting. So it's pretty fun game. It's a puzzle platformer. So what you do is you are Bugs Bunny. You go through the different stages and try and collect all of the carrots and get to the exit. And there's different enemies. So there's like Sylvester, uh, the Sam guy, Yosemite Sam. Sorry, I was forgetting the name. Wile E. Coyote, different enemies that if they touch you, they'll kill you. And then there's different items in the level that you can use against the enemies to kill them or incapacitate them. So there's like quite a few stages in the game. There's the achievement set as far as the breakdown has kind of an interesting setup. So some achievements it's like kill every enemy in a level. So you have to figure out the best way to maximize the items you have relative to the locations of the enemies because some items are like you can store the item and then use it whenever you want. Some items are like, oh, there's a crate here. If I push this crate off of the platform, it'll go to the platform below and kill the enemy. So you have to figure out which enemy it's intended for. Otherwise, you can get into a situation where you might end up having uh, one enemy left over at the end because you didn't plan accordingly. And then there's the opposite of that. So there's some levels that have pacifist achievements where you have to beat the entire level without killing enemies. So there's the pacifist achievements for some levels, and then there's the kill every enemy, and then there's just the standard, beat this level or beat that level. But like I said, I grew up with Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle as a kid for Game Boy, so it was fun to play the NES version of it and do some puzzle platforming, and it's just relaxing, nice game to kind of go through. Yet another game where you kind of have to think, and you don't have as much action going on, like an action platformer or things like that. So puzzle platformers for me, for some reason, just are really, really relaxing and just a really enjoyable time. Sometimes I feel like with retro achievements in general, speaking as a whole, sometimes you're in the mood to like be really, really engaged with a game and like really 100% focused, like gotta, for example, damageless achievements, right? You got to have your full attention, full blinders on. But sometimes it's nice to kind of just have a game where you can have a show on in the background and kind of grind something out, especially with grindy games or RPGs too. But also sometimes with puzzle platformers, that can be kind of a fun thing to do at the same time. What about you? What was your last game?
Well, my last game is it's another SM64 game hack. This one is Sunshine Secret Book by another game by Stefan1337. So why I bring that up again? It's mainly because one, rather than collecting a star, you collect a beautiful sunshine, and I do love Mars Sunshine. So that was very cute. And two, the music of this game is wonderful. Three, the game is pretty short, so you have only to collect like 40 stars. This game took me 2 hours and a half to do, so it's very short. I like it a lot, and on that, the stages there are wonderful, are well crafted, well done. The stars are not too hard to get, but just like seeing the design levels, all the little details, how the places are places, and I really have a hard time to find those three power-ups, but I will never tell if to people if they want to actually like play the game because I don't want to spoil them. But I have a hard time to finding them. And yeah, the game, I mean, it's just like your traditional Super Mario 64, but it's just very well done. So I really wanted to talk about it because it was very fun to play it, and I wish other people would play as well this game. So, further ado, let's introduce ourselves for the first segment of this week. The second segment, excuse me. Hacks, Homebrews, and my sense game. So shoot, I'm very interested. Can you give us like a little description of what is a hack, a homebrew, and an unlicensed game for the people don't know?
Sure. So, yeah, to start this segment off, I just wanted to kind of get people a little bit more familiarized with what the difference between a hack, a homebrew, and an unlicensed game are. They are all kind of under a similar umbrella. So I wrote down a definition of what I would consider each. I don't know if it's a perfect definition, but hacks are essentially original assets of a licensed game that are arranged in a different way to create a brand new experience. Homebrews are original ideas and new concepts that are turned into games with original content and assets. And then unlicensed games are typically based versions of licensed games. And retro achievements is chock full of all three of these. Some of the most fun titles that I've been able to experience on retro achievements are hacks because it's so fascinating to see what people are able to do with some of these original with some of the original assets of a licensed game and completely make a brand new experience that really engages you and kind of gets you playing a completely new adventure but still enjoying that nostalgic feel of the original assets of the game.
So for me, what is interesting? Let's kick off this discussion with hacks. So first thing off, for me, my definition of an axe is pretty much like having like almost like a fan based games where example like it's a Mario games or Pokemon games or example like Super Mario Kart, and you introduce the players with a different aspect. Like we mentioned we introduced a lot of game of the week with the hacks game and stuff. So like we mentioned, like you take like the original form of Super Mario 64, but you give your player some time. You give sometimes some hack or pretty much like Chaos Edition. Like they just like the same games. Like even like on Pokemon, they are like the same maps, the same games, same Pokemon and stuff. No news to it. But sometimes you have like a very major stuff happen. Like example on the Chaos Editions, you have more uh, effect or a lot of stuff going on, and it's make the game's experience different. But sometime when you play a hack, and like I did for SM64 the Sunshine, you have like a very different aspect or different maps to it, which the person take very a long time to create, and then create like some new places to go through, to visit new maps, new concepts, new ability, new powers. And this is where, for me, I really like. I'm really a fan of those hack stuff because sometimes I'm very amazed when I play like a new games, but it's very different, unique styles or unique different way to see the games. And some hack I did play it, I'm very sad because this is pretty much like, oh, this is another version of Pokemon Fire and Red, or oh, it's another same similar for Silver or Crystal. This is the same maps, same Pokemon. Nothing is new, nothing is changed. Same gym leaders, same base level. So sometimes it's a little bit like sad to play those kind of game, but I kind of like it because I'm used to. Or but sometimes, like I said, like when I'm play something like very unique, like some new races or new stuff, this is where I like much play some hacks.
Yeah, it is really interesting to see. I want to say just that level of depth that some authors go to really make the game stand alone and make it a brand new experience for the player. And like you said, you've got everything ranging from slight changes here and there to completely full blown. Like they even took the original assets of the game and added like new graphical stuff, new twists, things like that. I think that I've really hit my favorite style of game with these crossover games, because I've played three different crossovers that I can think of, and they've all been extremely fun. Like, I'm just hooked, can't put them down. I talked a little bit about Banjo Kazooie Jiggies of Time, which is the crossover between Ocarina of Time for N64 and Banjo Kazooie. I've played uh, the crossover between Super Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time, and I've heard it through the grapevine that there is also a it's going to be I don't think this is out yet. I think someone was telling me that this is going to be coming out, not an achievement set, but the game, and then inevitably probably an achievement set, a crossover between Banjo Kazooie and GoldenEye 64. And that to me sounds extremely interesting. I can see myself definitely getting into that. So that's something that is really getting me hooked. Is these crossover hacks are just so much fun. It's just so cool to see somebody do something like that. And there's always a lot. Another thing that I think of is there's always kind of a lot of, like, for me, like laughing about, not laughing at the author, but just laughing at, like, what the heck is this, or like what is this. So there's always just that aspect of like seeing brand new stuff and just kind of being really excited about it, because it's original assets. Like you said, we've seen it before, we just haven't seen it in this format, and so it really adds that originality to it that gives it a whole new spin. And I'm hoping that over time we continue to see more crossover hack achievement sets, because I just really seem to not be able to put them down. Like, they are so much fun.
Speaking of that aspect, shoot, um, one thing I don't know if it's the case for you, but one thing I'm very amazed about those hack and stuff, like, since, like, example, let's say, like, something, both of us, we have played, like, some, almost like the same typical hacks where, example, you play, like, Pokemon Red and Blues, and this is pretty much the same games over and over, but as the game the not the game but as the time go on, we seem like recently, like those last year or maybe like 2 years before or even this year, we have some set where the quality of those crossovers and the quality of those games, like the same mechanic, like you play like Mario 64, but it's very crazy game, uh, game design or game level, the level or the graphic design is always like another level, another aspect. And I'm very like amazed to see how it changed and how it's like more into it or more different than it is. So I have a question for you. So every time you play a hack, what is what is the thing you're looking for into the games to make you like, yes, I like the games, or oh, it's look like very similar. It's like, what is your good, what is your thought about like what do you like the most into the games you play?
Definition of like a good hack would be something where all of the for me, I think all of the assets being used in new ways, number one. So a good example of this might be for the Banjo Kazooie Jiggies of Time crossover set. There were some situations where you can shoot eggs backwards, and you have to do that to uh, knock, destroy, break. Sorry, I'm trying to think of a way to say this. Destroy uh, environmental objects that you wouldn't be able to reach, that are oftentimes like underwater. That probably didn't come out the right way, but something to that effect. Like there will be rocks underwater, and in Banjo Kazooie you can't normally attack underwater, but you can be above the platform, shoot eggs backwards, and they'll land in the water and destroy rocks or destroy parts of the environment to be able to access different areas of the map. So that's I think that's one big thing for me is just taking the parts of the game that are still functional and original and just making them into new mechanics that you haven't seen before. Because in original Banjo Kazooie, you were never doing that. Um, the other thing too is I always like to have a step up in difficulty, and the reason I say that is because I feel like most people that are playing these types of games where they're hacks, so they're using original assets, I feel like most people are familiar with the mechanics of the original assets, so they're kind of looking for a bit more of a challenge. I don't mean that to be a gatekeeper in any way or anything like that. By all means, if you haven't played the original, then I'm not saying don't play a hack version of the game, but I think most people, the majority of people that are playing these hacks are people that enjoyed the original game and just want, they're looking for something new. They're looking for a twist. So those are the two big things: is taking the original mechanics and really ramping them up, and then also ramping up the difficulty with the expectation that the player is kind of familiar with the original rules of the game and the how the maps work, how the attacks work depending on the game. But what about you? What do you usually look for in a hack, or like a homebrew? Not a homebrew, sorry, a hack.
Well, that's a very interesting you mentioned there. Before answering your question, I mean, like I mentioned, I really enjoyed all the design graphic behind to it, and sometimes the graphic to it. Not the graphic, but the game mechanic. But the way you say like the difficulty increase, sometime some hack have Kaizo into it. So this is like one branch to the extremes difficulty you can have, because I play some Kaizo Pokemon, and let me tell you, this is pretty damn hard. But it's the same games, but they very push it to an extreme stuff. And even for SM Super Mario World, they have like crazy Kaizo behind to it. So so the difficulty behind those hack are pretty hard. So another interesting, let's talk about the homebrew style, the homebrew category now. For me, homebrew and hack are, I mean, the three of them are pretty like similar in my opinions. But the homebrew, which I wanted to, well, let's talk about it a little bit. um, I wanted to bring the fact of when I did some my studies, I develop a little games where it's pretty like just simple 2D games where it was just like a little characters where you go into like a maze and collecting a little like maybe like what 5 or 6 items into the maps and then finish up the game. So a lot of those homebrew games are all made by some people or some little company, but not too much, and they just publish them to, and those people can buy the game and stuff like that. So a lot of those homebrew games which we did play, I think they are pretty damn well made. Those music are very fantastic. So did you ever play some? Did you have like a couple homebrews? Did you play any remember shoot?
Yeah, homebrews are always interesting to see what people come up with when they use original, concepts, assets, and content. And I've had some games that I've played that are homebrew that, a full blown studio could have could have made back in the day. Pretty good example of this would be Deus or Deus. I'm not sure how you say it, and I definitely talked about this previously uh, on the podcast before, but it's just crazy the amount of detail that people put into original concepts for homebrews. That was a really fun game that I played a while ago. That when I played it, I mean, I was shocked at the amount of details. Like this could have been, a full blown Game Boy game back in the day. this is better than a lot of Game Boy games, arguably. So it's really interesting to see what people are able to come up with not using any assets, because I think that I would say overall it's probably maybe not harder, but I want to, because I'm not a developer, I don't make games, I don't work in that aspect, but I think that it's harder to come up with an original concept than to take assets of a pre-existing game and then make them into a concept, right? Because you're literally starting from scratch. So I think that's a big challenge for a lot of people when they're making games, is trying to figure out like what's my concept, what am I going for here. If you have pre-existing assets, at least you've got that going for you, but if you're starting from scratch, that's a little bit different and arguably more difficult in my opinion.
So one of the game the Umbro they played was the Alter Ego. So it was like a little like short games. I think it's like 25 levels, and then it's just like a little simple mechanic where the you have like yourself, and you have like a duplicate of yourself, and you can like change the position on them. And some stage have like example, you can swap yourself like 2 or 3 times, and if you pass that mark you cannot even swap your two character between those. So this is like a very fun mechanics. I did not play that much of Unbrewed, but I know like the people that make those are fantastic. And speaking of other games, let's talk about a little bit of unlicensed games. And before closing this segment, the only I think the I mentioned that one time into the podcast. The only unlicensed game I did played was the Pokemon NES, and then that was like, I mean, that was very a fun experience. But the game have like some stuff into it, like I already mentioned it. But I'm not the most familiar with the unlicensed games, but I for sure playing like Pokemon into the NES was something like out of the taste. I know they have like a couple more unlicensed, but yeah. So what do you have for us, shoot?
For unlicensed, I played Super Mario 4 a while ago, and that was fun and not fun. Um, it's it was fun in the sense that it was cool to see what somebody made that they would think would be kind of a continuation off of the series. Not fun in the sense that it doesn't really feel like a Mario game per se, with just the way that the jumps worked, and it was somewhat unforgiving. The three Mario games for Game Boy for the tuning are not extremely difficult on by themselves. There's some tough achievements in those sets for sure, but the games themselves without achievements are not that difficult. So this fourth one, really just the physics of the game were really tough. Sometimes, I mean, they're unlicensed games, so things can be be janky, right? Things can be very odd with unlicensed games, and people continue to play them and things like that, and they're fun. It's just sometimes the mechanics can be a little bit odd depending on the game. But I think overall, because I'm kind of just looking at what I have played so far, I think I probably, of hacks, homebrews, and unlicensed games, um, I probably have played the fewest unlicensed games. And then I think between hacks and homebrews, it's a pretty close tie for how many I've completed of each. So unlicensed to me is kind of the one the style of game between those three that I have played the least.
So thank you, Shoot, for your thoughts there. For the chat who like listening to these videos, I have a question for you all. What do you think is the best for you? Do you prefer the hacks, or do you prefer the unlicensed or the unbrews? leave us a comment down below, and we're gonna be very excited to see your answer there. So let's introduce us to the last segment for today's episode. We're gonna talk about time investment per achievement. So this is a segment where me and Shoot are both really in because we spend a lot of time into retro achievement, and we did grind a lot into retro achievement, and the times is like a very big factor into sometime what we play and sometime what we don't play. And today we're gonna answer you all, or we're gonna try to give you some insight about what for us was a success and not, because sometimes you have a jobs and you don't have all the times in the world to playing achievement and stuff. But this is a very big segment. So first, so yeah, shoot. What is your? Do you have any? So what? Yeah, go ahead.
No worries. So, uh, yeah, we talked a little bit about this before, but it's just kind of looking at when you're playing retro achievements and you're competing, and you're trying to kind of think about your time and the amount of time you can spend as time investment per achievement. Do you look at the point value in an achievement versus the time it will take when you're considering what set to play next? And the answer for me to that question is sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. I've been pretty busy with work lately outside of retro achievements, and so I've had a little bit less time to kind of try and grind points. But that is one of the things if you're trying to be a little bit more competitive on retro achievements and climb up the ranks is considering the amount of time that it will take you to complete an achievement and then the point value of the achievement as opposed to the time that you're going to put into it. So for example, RPG games in general, a lot of people talk about this, but RPG games can take a long time and they're often worth quite a few points. Sometimes they're worth 1,000 to 2,000 points. I'm kind of just throwing out a number, but if you look at a lot of RPGs on the site, these aren't like 1, 2, 300 point titles, right? These are long games. So often the point value can be about 1,000 to 2,000 points. But with that being said, that the time that you're going to put into these RPG games, I mean, Final Fantasy VII took me 2.5 months. This was before work from home though, so I was commuting and spending a lot of time at work outside of my home and didn't have as much time to put into the title. But that's kind of one of the things that I consider is, how much time am I going to be spending on this versus the amount of points that I'm going to get out of it. And some days I'm feeling like that, but other days I'm feeling like I'm just going to do whatever the heck I want because I just want to kind of be a little bit more geared towards just relaxing. And I kind of mix up the two. That's kind of the spectrum of competitiveness where some people are just always focused on the points, I think, and some people are focused always on the fun. And then there's kind of that middle ground, which I feel like I'm starting to work my way towards. For a little while, I think I was a little bit too oriented towards just grinding points, and it became more of a chore than fun. So I'm kind of glad I'm getting back to that middle ground personally. But what about you, Draco? What are your thoughts on that?
So you have made interesting 2 point here. So the first point you made the point of RPGs. So why I'm saying that is because when you spend a lot of time into investment your time into achievement, you have genres. So genres we already mentioned a lot. We already talk a lot. You have a couple of genres where, if you example, you're gonna play RPGs. Well, if you play RPGs, I'm playing like I did started Pokemon Argo Soul Silvers, which is a lot of time, massive times to do. I spent, I think, so far 40 to 50 hours just for that. I spent 40 hours to 50 hours again into Digimon World 2. It's a like very fun game, but at the end, the point set is massive. So I get a lot of reward, but spending a lot of time into that is like very a lot. So RPG are maybe not the way to go for some people. Some people really like like should mention. Some people go for the funds over the points. But if you really want to in some way to grind into retro achievement, maybe RPGs maybe not the way for you to going for. So what is the other genre to go? Well, for me, I think the top three best genres to go for is probably like racing games, because racing games, a lot of those are typically like not very long. You can have a lot of achievements depending on what the set could be, and they are sometimes the mechanic are not that difficult to understand or to pick up. So for me, racing game are always a suit to go, or something like massive to go and very fast to go without like the amount of time. Second of all, you have platforming. Platforming, I think, is like very huge into retro achievement. You have a lot of platformings, like a lot of collection items to get, a lot of example like Mario styles to do. They're very classic. Do this, complete this stage, get that and that. So those game, like normally like those set are tend to be like less than 10 hours, and 10 hours to getting some amount of points. It's pretty a good deal when you play platforming and if you're really good at platforming. So those two genres are very crucial, and I think I have like two other genres which I want to put there, and probably she would answer me with that after, are shooting games and fighting games. So fighting games are very good in some ways, because it's just typical like fightings. Those games are not supposed to, they don't have like story wise, they don't have anything else. It's straightforward. And if you're very good at fighting games, you have a lot of, like, you gotta like save a lot of times getting a lot of stuff, a lot of chivos and stuff. So those is a very good genre to go for. And shooting, so some people are I'm very terrible at shooting games, but some people in shooting games, they just like example like those trailer shooters where you start at the base and then they never die, and pretty much like they finish the entire game very quickly. And that's what a lot of players go for. So, what is your thought, Shoot, about what I just said?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. You talked a little bit about some of the aspects I was referring to with RPGs, and I think we're in agreement there. As far as other genres that you mentioned, platformers, I would say for point grinding, especially if you know the platformer quite well, are king, and fighting games too. If you're good at that particular fighting game, which is where I've had a lot of success, is fighting games where I'm really good at them. I've been able to blast through them pretty quickly versus spending a lot of time going through an RPG. And this is all, keep in mind to our audience, this is all with the caveat of play what you want, play, enjoy yourself. This is just talking about the general aspect of point grinding and the amount of time that you're putting into things. And people have lives outside of retro achievements, and that's why it can take a lot of time to complete even platformers at times, or things like that, especially if the difficulty is up there. So that's kind of one thing that I look for in platformers and shoot 'em ups when I'm playing them, is how is the achievement set broken down as far as what's going to be the worst stuff that's really going to be hard to get. The damage lists, the weapon lists, things like that. But I would agree with you that as far as points that you can grind a little bit quicker, fighting games for sure, because fighting games a lot of the time are broken up like, for the achievement sets, beat the game with each character, right? Do a combo with each character, beat the game on very hard difficulty, but you get your choice of character, which is usually quite nice. um, and then there may be some other unique like secret character achievements mixed in. That's just me kind of throwing out some general achievement makeups that I've seen throughout the different fighting sets that I've played. But yeah, for sure, I mean, long story short, action shoot 'em ups and platforming and fighting games, I've all found overall, if I think if you were to make a chart and then look at the amount of time spent, you would see that for the most part, those games, you're spending less time per achievement than RPGs, for example.
Also, it's always like a way to see this, like how good you are as a person or as a gamer. I mean, everyone is different. Shoot is better at fighting than I do. I can manage to it, but what he can do into fighting is very different than I do into racing. So a lot of the time, it's pretty much like what do you like to want to play and how fun you have. If you have a lot of fun, like right now I'm playing like Toy Story and I spend like three or 4 days in a row to it and I still did not finish it. And I have some tough to it, but I do enjoy it. So like I said, like we said, like time investment is a lot into RA. If we spend a decent amount of time into it, I spent over like 2 years into retro achievement just for achievement, and I gained a lot of achievement. I did grind a lot and I always wanted to find what is the quickest to reach the top because that's my goal into retro achievement. Some people that's not their goal into it. So they just want example, they just want the badges or they just want to spend time into just RPG and that's fine. Um, so yeah, they just spend the time of what you consider like what is fun for you, and don't worry about the rest. We just wanted to give some insight of what is like the best way to approach an achievement, what is like the best time investment into it. But at the end, the major goal is having fun, and if you enjoy what you're currently doing, this is the best way to doing it. And I respect, like I think I saw like one profile into Richard Jimin. The guy have like almost like a lot of RPG, and seeing this is incredible how this player have a lot of points, but at the same time you have a lot of RPG masters, which is pretty damn sick. So
Yeah, I mean, there are people on Retro Achievements that there are very high ranked and they've played a lot of RPGs. And they've got, a ton of other games under their belt too of all other genres. But there are people on Retro Achievements that have played a lot, like a lot, a lot of RPGs and are still very high ranked. So this isn't an RPG bashing session by any means, although we'll probably get a little bit of flack about that. But it's just one of those things where, and like I said, and like I always say, enjoy the site how you want. We're just kind of talking about the competitive aspects of it. And one other thing I did want to talk about um, with a strategy and approaching achievements is approaching achievements that are extremely brutal and may take lots of time and practice. So complete playthroughs with unique character setups, low level runs, weapon lists, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, and kind of how you approach those. So the way I think about it is when I look at a set, if I'm really, really determined that I want to master a set and I'm going to greenlight it, I'm for sure going to just do it, then I do always look for the hardest achievements first. And oftentimes I will try and do them first. I typically follow that process with fighting games as I always go for like the hard mode completion a lot of the time. Sometimes I don't. If I don't know the game extremely well, I'll kind of get my feet wet, see what the game's about, figure out what's going to be my best setup to do this, like what character for me is going to be the best for hard mode, what's going to be the character. And if I don't know that because I haven't played the game that much or I have a mediocre amount of experience with the game, then I kind of need to do some testing and figure out, what can I get away with. I'm kind of speaking a little bit to just my fighting game experience, to clarify a little bit. But that's one of the things that I always look at. And sometimes I do go the inverse where I'm looking at, what's the hardest achievement knock it out first. I always prefer to knock out the hardest achievements in the set first if I can, and if the game permits me to do so, because that way I feel like I can kind of, it's kind of all downhill from there after the fact that I've completed that hardest achievement. So when I'm looking at a set and kind of investigating and doing my due diligence, excuse me, and trying to figure out um, what's going to be the best way to get through the game, I always do kind of take a look at the hardest achievements in a set. And is this feasible for me? Is it a reasonable expectation for me to be able to accomplish that? And sometimes that mindset can be a little bit challenging, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And so when you're thinking like that, I've played games where I'm like, there's no friggin' way I'm gonna be able to do this. And then as I play through the game and I kind of start getting better at the game, I'm like, I can see how that's possible. I can see how I can get to that point, in the achievement, or I can see how I can be able to work towards being able to do this. So there are times where I don't think things are possible. I'm like, there's just no way. But then as I play through the game and I get better at it, I'm like, this is going to be really tough. But I see a way to do this, and that's kind of that aha moment that we've talked a little bit about on previous episodes.
So a couple of things I want to mention, which should bring something very interesting, is first of all, the time investment per the achievement like you try to do. Like example, you spend a lot of time. Example, you spend 20, 30 hours into the games, and then the more time you spend into that games, at the upper goal, as well as maybe get the mastery or not, but you gaining a lot of experience in generals, which is a very good key. Example, you play like you're not very good at Super Mario 64, but the more you play it, the more your skill will increase by a little and a little and a little, and the more you play it, the more you're good at it. It's pretty much on any type of games or any type of thing you do in real life. So the more experience you get, you can do other game as well with the same genres, the same aspect to it. So a lot of the time you spend there is very valuable at the end. And the other one I want to mention is, um, if you spend a lot of time into one achievement and you cannot even do it, just let it aside for a couple of times, maybe like a day or two, and come back to it. Sometime when you let something goes and you come back, you're always stronger. You have more thoughts. You have more. You can proceed better and other stuff like that. So you're always learning something new. And if you spend, example, you spend 10 hours into something which is very easy for somebody else, don't be negative about it. Be proud. Be always proud of what you accomplish, of what the goal is to be. Like for some people, like mastering SM64 is very like it's very good, but for some other people, it was like this is take like it's nothing for them. Don't compare yourself to other players. If your time advanced, you learn something and be proud of it. This is the most stuff you can learn into already, and that's what I the most learn into it, because sometimes I always look up like, oh, this person is better than me, huh? Maybe I cannot do it, but no, I have grind my way ups into the tops, and I try a different paths than the others. And at the end, I learn a lot. I learn a lot of mechanics. I learn a lot of other stuff. And like before, like just an example, I cannot do even Kaizo, but now I can do a little bit more Kaizo because I practice it a lot. So I spend a lot of time to just going through that goals, and that will make me into the top first.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Is just that, it's always good to kind of be competitive, but at the same time, don't spend all that time just beating yourself up about looking at people's timestamps, or looking at how long it took somebody from start to finish, because that can always be kind of a downer at times. And so it's good to recognize your weaknesses and understand that you're not going to be as good at games as some other players. And vice versa, like you mentioned, Draco. I think we'd both be pretty comfortable admitting that you're way better at racing games than I am, and I'm way better at fighting games than you are. But you have mastered fighting games that I've mastered, and I've mastered racing games that you've mastered. And so it's really, and talking about the time aspect, you could probably say that it's taken me less time to master some fighting games than you. And racing games, I mean, we can look at, what was it, Lego Racers? That took me a lot longer than you. And I had that one map that gave me a lot of challenges with, like, that egg collecting challenge or something like that. I remember from a long time ago. So it is really important to, when you're being competitive, to not be too hard on yourself, and always make sure that you're enjoying the site how you would like to. And we talked a little bit about this before, but for some people that's trying to get as many badges as possible. For some people that's trying to get as many points in the highest rank as possible. For some people that's trying to get the highest retro ratio, and for some people it's all about the completion percentage. And for other people it's a mix of the different elements. For me, for example, I'm trying to keep grinding and be competitive. Like I said, I'm quite busy outside of retro achievements recently with work and things like that, but I'm working towards that 85% completion. I'm sitting at like an 81%, and I'm kind of enjoying going back through games that I gave up on before, and having a fresh start on that. You mentioned uh, going through games and spending some time on them, and then putting them down, and then coming back to them. And a lot of us do that. I think a lot of us on retro achievements, we put something down, and we put it away for another day, and then we come back to it, and we have a fresh set of eyes on it, and we feel really good about it. So that's a really big thing, is just, you know we're beating a dead horse at this point, but enjoy the site how you want. And just practice, practice, practice. That's the big thing, is just practicing, and putting in the time, and making sure that at the end of the day you're still having fun, even if you're grinding out that really hard achievement. Because the one of the big things I always think about with the achievements is, the more I grind something that's a really difficult achievement, is when I get to the end of that achievement, it's just like the most, it's so weird, because it's that big trade-off of, okay, this achievement is really, really tough, and it's really, really frustrating, but when I get it, it's just like nothing. There's no feeling in the world like that, right? That rush of being able to be successful at something that is so difficult. So I think that's all I had as far as my thoughts on time investment per achievement. So I'll wrap it up and throw it over to you.
Well, thank you a lot for your final touch shoot. Yeah, you will. We both agree on that, and that was a very good way to make this conclusion of that segment. So that wraps things up for today's episode of our podcast. Be sure to like the videos and hit the bell to make sure you never miss an episode of us. Otherwise, I would be extremely sad. Let us know in the comments what your favorite hacks on Brute and Wireless game is. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and hope to see you again soon. Bye!